For Generation X, it was a childhood of cars and automotive action. Car chases and crashes dominated TV shows, movies, and even toys of the period. Some of the most widely advertised toys in this class weren't the die-cast Hot Wheels or Matchbox cars, nor even the radio-controlled cars of the day. Even if you never owned a set of these, electronic slot car racing dominated the Gen X experience, and the venerable Scalextric company is still at the forefront of slot car toys to this day. With all the commercials we were inundated with from companies like Tyco and Ideal, you might think slot cars started in the 1970s and reached their heyday in the 1980s. But in fact, slot cars began all the way back in 1912, when the Lionel electric train maker made the first slot car set. The concept didn't make it past 1915, and over the intervening years, most electric racing car sets used rails like train sets did. The electrified slot design would come back in a big way in 1957 when Scalextric was born. The cars were 1/32 scale from the start, and the dominant scale of Scalextric vehicles remains 1/32 to this day. Admittedly, I didn't latch onto the slot car craze of the 1980s, despite seeing plenty of the commercials. As I've said many times, I was an action figure kid. Even when companies like Ideal would make licensed sets for slot cars in themes that appealed to me, such as Knight Rider, something in my childhood brain knew my parents didn't have the floor space for a toy like that. Flash forward about 20 years in my life, and it was no longer just an interest in the fictional adventures of cars, but a true interest in the vehicles themselves. A Lancia Stratos didn't have to become a robot for me to find the car itself fascinating.
What a fantastic car!
An Aston Martin didn't need rockets in the fog lamps for me to love it. A Delorean didn't have to be a time machine. These cars were now compelling to me on their own merits, and in 2009 I purchased one of these lifelong favorites, buying a Delorean and driving it down the eastern side of the United States on back roads on a 4-day adventure of my own. When Melinda and I came back from holiday in the UK in 2019, I did a video on Airfix quick-build Spitfire kits I had purchased in York. This video apparently made the radar of the marketing people at Hornby, the parent company of Airfix and Scalextric. They contacted me and asked if I also liked slot cars. I told them I'd always been intrigued by them, despite not owning any of my own in childhood. That was enough for Scalextric, and they surprised me with their American Police Chase track set to look at. That Thanksgiving, I took it over to my parents' house for the holiday, and my mother, brother, and nephew spent the day putting the set through its paces, with my brother exclaiming, "This is the best Thanksgiving ever." I'd planned on reviewing it relatively soon after that, but then I found out that in the latter half of 2020, Scalextric had plans to release two of my favorite cars of all time as compatible 1/32 scale slot racers, and I knew I'd want to include them in the video, so I waited, hoping Scalextric didn't think I'd hoodwinked them. The cars finally arrived at retail, and I had them shipped immediately to Retroblasting HQ, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let's look at the main set. The American Police Chase set clearly aims to harken back to the late 1970s era of American car chase entertainment, like Smokey and the Bandit and the Dukes of Hazzard, with a beefy Dodge Challenger trying to outrun the police. Except in this case, the police have themselves a pretty slick AMC Javelin converted into a cop car. The vehicles come equipped with multiple wire braid connector discs. These are exchangeable cartridges with wire braids threaded through them that make contact with the metal slots on the track so the vehicles can get power to race. Just be careful when swapping out a worn cartridge for a new one. I learned pretty quickly that the side mirrors on the cars are fragile and break off if you aren't careful where you're putting your fingers when handling these vehicles. The track for American Police Chase provides two main loops with an intersection at one point. some outer guardrails on the main curve, a section where the inner lane moves toward the opponent in a simulated sideswipe maneuver, and a removable jump ramp section. All of the track sections are compatible with other Scalextric 132 scale sets, so if you have track extensions and accessories, you can customize your racetrack over time with all kinds of crazy stuff. The track is powered by a basic AC adapter, and the set comes with a pair of analog trigger controls for any cars placed on the track. The triggers are colored blue and red, so figuring out which lane is controlled by a particular trigger isn't so difficult. The controls have 4 speed settings on a switch in the handle, allowing you to limit the available speed of the cars for practice on curves, or I guess slow your vehicles to a leisurely Sunday drive if you wish. When set to the 3rd and 4th settings, the trigger provides variable speeds depending on how far you press it. This allows you to speed up for jumps or to pass your opponent in the straightaways, but then you better be ready to slow down in the curves or... While I only had slight experience with slot cars going into this, I was pleased at how quickly I was able to pick up the feel of the racing trigger. And the intersection and turns made sure I learned quickly about the importance of decelerating at the right moments to avoid total disaster. The jump, being optional, can give the player some fits getting the placement of the 2 sides correct. There's a margin of error where I wasn't sure if I had placed the ramps too far apart or if my driving was causing the car to fail each attempt. If there is any drawback to this set, it's the trigger controls themselves. Sometimes you can pull the trigger at the starting line and nothing happens. The other car takes off and you're left sitting there looking the fool. I found that the connectivity of the triggers to their internal contact points is finicky. For example, with the blue trigger, I was having to exert slight angled pressure to the right in addition to pulling the trigger back for the car to react suitably. The red trigger had fewer issues, but it would occasionally ignore my commands in a similar fashion. As these are analog triggers, I'm assuming they are Scalextric's basic offering, and if I wanted to get serious about slot tracks, they offer a much higher-end control system with wireless sticks. I won't lie though, the inconsistent connectivity of the analog sticks until I figured out their individual quirks was not a fun discovery. As for the cars themselves, they were the highlight of the experience. With working headlamps and tail lamps, seeing them race around the track is pretty addictive once you get going. The AMC Javelin police car even has a siren light and emits a siren sound to boot. Amusingly, the sound it blares is not an American police siren, but that signature European police car sound, which if you know anything about me, you'll know that just made me love the experience even more. However, as I said earlier, the big thrill I was looking forward to with Scalextric was the ability to swap out cars on the track with some of my favorite cars of all time. In 2020, Scalextric produced a slot car racer of Doc Brown's Delorean time machine from the original Back to the Future, complete with Marty behind the wheel and an optional lightning rod hook. And as thrilling as that is, it was learning that Scalextric would provide my favorite car of all time for slot racing that had my anticipation at maximum. Thanks to a bevy of automotive cameos in the upcoming James Bond film No Time to Die, Scalextric has released a slot car racer for the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Yes, the Vantage will make an appearance in No Time to Die, but every Bond fan knows this is the Aston Martin from The Living Daylights with Timothy Dalton. Being able to race the Aston V8 and the DeLorean on the same track is a weird sight to behold, especially knowing in real life the Aston would wipe the floor with the DeLorean any day of the week. In slot car racing, those disadvantages are not a concern. However, as I was racing these cars, a thought occurred to me. 2022 will mark the 35th anniversary of The Living Daylights. The police vehicle siren and general configuration of the car in the American Police Chase set made me realize it would be possible to do a themed Scalextric track set to commemorate the awesome chase sequence in The Living Daylights. The siren sound is already spot on to the movie sound effects coming from the Soviet police cars. Swap out the body shell and you've got Bond's racing adversary. Plus, Scalextric already has the Aston V8. Just put the driver in a leather coat and maybe add a blonde woman in the passenger seat and you have the vehicles ready. The chase itself seems tailor-made for a slot track.
What is this?
I've had a few optional extras installed.
Bond blasts through a lorry trailer, which could feature at one point on the circuit. You have a tunnel. There's a shed the Aston drives through at the edge of the lake. Heck, the smaller loop of the track could be the frozen lake itself. And lastly, Bond activates the jet engine on the Aston for a crazy jump.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it. It's good.
It's all there, ready for 2022 if Scalextric has the impetus to consider it. Personally, I'd pre-order it the minute it was offered. So to Scalextric, if you're listening, I say...
Do it. Do it.
Do it.
Do it! Do it!
Brace yourself.
Hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you'd like to watch more automotive mayhem, you can watch our feature on Hot Wheels crack-ups right here. Or you can watch our videos about Airfix quick build kits here. And I'm not gonna move until I get a response from Scalextric on the Living Daylights racing set.